Forget what you think you know about the apostles. These weren't stained glass saints frozen in time. They were flesh and blood, living in a world as turbulent and uncertain as our own. A world of Roman oppression, religious upheaval, and radical new ideas. Imagine a world where your faith could cost you everything. Imagine being an ordinary person, called to do the extraordinary. That's the world of the 12 apostles. We're not just talking about dusty Bible stories here. We're talking about a revolution, a movement that changed the course of history, sparked by a handful of men who dared to believe in something bigger than themselves. And their journey wasn't a walk in the park. It was a dangerous, exhilarating, life-altering adventure. We're going to dive deep into their world. Are you ready to meet the real apostles? We often see the apostles as these perfect, almost mythical figures. But what if I told you they were just like us? They had doubts, fears, and flaws. They argued, they made mistakes, and they sometimes questioned their own calling. Peter, the impulsive leader, denied even knowing Jesus. Thomas, the skeptic, needed proof before he could believe. These weren't superheroes. They were ordinary people caught up in extraordinary circumstances. And that's what makes their stories so powerful, so relatable. They show us that faith isn't about being perfect. It's about being willing to step out in faith even when you're terrified, even when you don't have all the answers. It's about the choice to believe, to have hope. Their struggles are our struggles. Their triumphs can be our triumphs. To understand the apostles, we need to understand their world. Picture this, the iron fist of the Roman Empire crushing any dissent. Imagine the simmering tension between the Roman occupiers and the Jewish population, yearning for freedom and a Messiah. This wasn't some peaceful, idyllic setting. It was a powder keg ready to explode. Religious fervor was high, with various Jewish sects vying for influence. The Pharisees, with their strict adherence to the law, the Sadducees, the priestly elite, collaborating with the Romans, the Essenes, seeking purity in the desert, and the Zealots ready to fight for their freedom. This is the backdrop against which Jesus and his apostles emerged, preaching a radical message of love, forgiveness, and a kingdom not of this world. A message that challenged the existing power structures and ultimately led to their persecution. It was in this environment that the apostles lived, that they preached, and that they ultimately died. Let's start with Simon, a rough-around-the-edges fisherman from the shores of Galilee. He was a man of action, impulsive, passionate, and probably quick to anger. Can you imagine him, calloused hands, weathered face, spending his days mending nets and hauling in fish? Then Jesus walks into his life, turning his world upside down with a simple invitation. Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Simon, renamed Peter, meaning rock, became a leader among the apostles. But this rock was far from solid at first. He was the one who walked on water, then sank when his faith faltered. He was the one who boldly declared Jesus as the Messiah, yet later denied him 3 times out of fear. Peter's denial is one of the most heart-wrenching moments in the Gospels. Imagine the shame, the guilt, the feeling of utter failure. I remember a time in my own life when I faced a similar crisis of faith. I was going through a difficult period, filled with doubt and uncertainty. Like Peter, I felt like I had failed, like I wasn't strong enough to live up to my own beliefs. I wanted to give up, to walk away. But then I remembered Peter's story. I realized that even in his darkest moment, even after his betrayal, Jesus didn't give up on him. He saw Peter's potential, even when Peter couldn't see it himself. Peter's story is a testament to the power of forgiveness and redemption. After the resurrection, Jesus recommissioned Peter, asking him 3 times, "Do you love me?" Each affirmation was a step towards healing, a chance to rebuild trust. Peter went on to become a fearless leader of the early church, boldly proclaiming the gospel in the face of persecution. He eventually found himself in Rome, the heart of the empire, where he continued to spread the message of Christ. Nero, the infamous Roman emperor, unleashed a wave of brutal persecution against Christians, blaming them for the Great Fire of Rome. Peter, a prominent leader, was a prime target. He was arrested, imprisoned, and condemned to death by crucifixion, a particularly agonizing form of execution reserved for the lowest criminals. But even in the face of death, Peter's humility shone through. He requested to be crucified upside down, deeming himself unworthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. Imagine the scene: the inverted cross, a symbol of ultimate submission and unwavering faith. Peter's death was not an end, but a beginning. It was a powerful testament to the transformative power of the gospel, a legacy that continues to inspire believers today. Peter's story teaches us that our failures don't define us. It's how we respond to those failures that truly matters. It's about getting back up, learning from our mistakes, and allowing ourselves to be transformed by grace. It's about finding our purpose even when we feel broken and lost. Now let's turn to Andrew, Peter's brother. Often overshadowed by his more prominent sibling, Andrew was a quiet, unassuming man. Yet his role in the story of the early church was crucial. He was a follower of John the Baptist, drawn to his message of repentance in the coming Messiah. When John pointed to Jesus, declaring him the Lamb of God, Andrew was the first to follow. And what did he do? He immediately went and found his brother Peter, bringing him to meet Jesus. Andrew was a connector, an introducer, always bringing others into the fold. He's the one who found the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, a seemingly insignificant offering that Jesus used to miraculously feed thousands. I'm reminded of a woman I met at a community outreach program. She wasn't a leader, she wasn't a speaker, but she had a gift for connecting with people. She quietly went about her work, building relationships, offering a listening ear, and connecting people with the resources they needed. Like Andrew, she was an unsung hero, making a real difference in the lives of others without seeking recognition. Andrew's life was marked by humble service and a deep desire to share the good news. After Pentecost, he embarked on missionary journeys, traveling to distant lands, spreading the message of Christ. Tradition tells us he preached in Scythia, along the Black Sea, and in Greece. In the city of Patras, Andrew's ministry came to an end. He was arrested by the Roman governor Aegeates, who was angered by Andrew's success in converting many to Christianity, including his own wife. Condemned to death by crucifixion, Andrew, like his brother, displayed remarkable courage and humility. He requested to be crucified on an X-shaped cross, now known as the Saint. Andrew's cross, considering himself unworthy to die on the same type of cross as Jesus. But there's more. He asked to be tied, not nailed, prolonging his suffering, but also giving him more time to preach to the crowds who gathered to watch his execution. For 2 days, he hung on that cross, sharing the message of Christ until his last breath. Andrew's story challenges us to rethink our definition of success in leadership. It's not always about being in the spotlight. It's about serving faithfully, even in the small things, and bringing others to Christ. His story encourages us to embrace humility, to find joy in serving, and to share our faith boldly, even in the face of adversity. It reminds us that our impact is not measured by our position, but by our willingness to serve. James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John were known as the Sons of Thunder, a nickname given to them by Jesus, likely due to their fiery personalities and zealous nature. They were part of Jesus' inner circle, witnessing key events like the Transfiguration, where Jesus' divine glory was revealed. But they weren't perfect. They were ambitious, even asking Jesus if they could sit at his right and left hand in his kingdom. Jesus used this as a teaching moment, explaining that true greatness comes not from power and position, but from service and sacrifice. After Jesus' ascension, James became a prominent leader in the Jerusalem church. He was a powerful preacher, boldly proclaiming the gospel and converting many to the faith. The early church in Jerusalem faced intense persecution, not only from the Romans, but also from the Jewish authorities who saw Christianity as a threat to their traditions. James, as a leader of this growing movement, became a target. Herod Agrippa I, the Roman-appointed king of Judea, seeking to curry favor with the Jewish leaders, launched a crackdown on the Christians. James, the first of the apostles to be martyred, was arrested and beheaded around 44 AD. His execution was a shock to the nascent Christian community, a stark reminder of the cost of discipleship. James's death was not in vain. It served as a catalyst, strengthening the resolve of the remaining apostles and inspiring others to take up the mantle of leadership. His martyrdom became a powerful symbol of the cost of following Christ, A reminder that the path of discipleship is not always easy, but it is always worth it. James's story challenges us to examine our own ambitions. Are we seeking power and recognition, or are we willing to serve humbly, even if it means sacrificing our own desires? Are we willing to stand up for our faith, even when it's unpopular or dangerous? His life is a reminder that true leadership is found not in dominating others, but in serving them, even unto death. John, the brother of James, was known as the disciple whom Jesus loved. He had a unique relationship with Jesus, witnessing intimate moments like the Last Supper and standing at the foot of the cross during Jesus' crucifixion. It was to John that Jesus entrusted the care of his mother, Mary, a testament to the deep trust and affection between them. John was not only a close companion of Jesus, but also a profound theologian. He is traditionally attributed as the author of the Gospel of John, 3 epistles, and the Book of Revelation, writings that have shaped Christian thought and practice for centuries. His gospel, unlike the others, focuses on the deep spiritual meaning of Christ and his identity as the Son of God. While John was not martyred like most of the other apostles, he did not escape suffering. During the reign of Emperor Domitian, a wave of persecution swept through the Roman Empire. Christians were seen as a threat to the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor as a god. John, a prominent Christian leader, was exiled to the island of Patmos, a barren, rocky island in the Aegean Sea. Imagine him there, an old man isolated from his community, facing an uncertain future. But it was in this solitude, in this crucible of suffering, that John received a series of visions, a divine revelation that he recorded in the Book of Revelation. The Book of Revelation is a complex and often misunderstood text, filled with symbolic language and apocalyptic imagery. It speaks of a cosmic battle between good and evil, of the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom, and of the promise of a new heaven and a new earth. It's a message of hope in the midst of suffering, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, God is in control. I once visited a friend who was going through a very difficult time. He had lost his job, his marriage was falling apart, and he was struggling with illness. He felt like he was in his own personal exile, isolated and alone. But as we talked, he shared how he had been reading the Book of Revelation and how it had given him a sense of hope. He realized that even in his suffering, God was still with him, and that there was a bigger picture, a greater purpose that he couldn't yet see. John's experience on Patmos and the message of Revelation offer a powerful lesson for us today. When we face our own trials and tribulations, when we feel isolated and alone, we can find hope and strength in the knowledge that God is with us, that he is in control, and that he has a plan for our lives. After his exile, John returned to Ephesus, where he continued to minister until his death, around 100 AD. He lived a long life, a life dedicated to sharing the love and truth of Jesus Christ. John's story teaches us that even in our darkest moments, even when we feel like we've lost everything, God can still use us to do great things. His exile on Patmos became a crucible of creativity, a place where he received a message of hope that has resonated through the centuries. It reminds us to never lose hope, to trust that God is working in our lives even when we can't see it. Philip from Bethsaida, the same town as Peter and Andrew, was a practical, down-to-earth man. He was quick to see the logistical challenges in any situation. When Jesus asked him how they were going to feed the 5,000, Philip immediately focused on the practicalities, pointing out that they didn't have enough money to buy bread for everyone. Yet he was also a man of faith, open to the miraculous. He's the one that brought Nathanael to Jesus with the simple invitation, "Come and see." After Pentecost, Philip became a powerful evangelist, taking the gospel to Samaria, a region often avoided by Jews due to long-standing animosity. Samaria was a region with a mixed population of Jews and Gentiles, and there was a deep-seated animosity between the Samaritans and the Jews. Philip's ministry in Samaria was a significant step in breaking down those barriers and demonstrating the universality of the gospel message. Philip's ministry in Samaria was marked by signs and wonders, and many Samaritans came to believe in Jesus. He also had a significant encounter with an Ethiopian eunuch, a high official in the court of the Ethiopian queen. Philip explained the scriptures to him, leading to his baptism, a powerful demonstration of the gospel's reach beyond cultural and ethnic boundaries. Philip eventually traveled to Hierapolis in Phrygia, modern-day Turkey, where he continued to preach the gospel. According to tradition, he was arrested, tortured, and crucified for his faith. Some accounts say he was crucified upside down, like Peter, while others say he was hung by his ankles from a tree. Even in the face of excruciating pain, Philip remained steadfast in his faith, continuing to proclaim the message of Christ until his last breath. Philip's story reminds us that faith is not just about grand gestures or miraculous events. It's also about the everyday, practical ways we live out our beliefs. It's about being open to the needs of others, sharing our faith with those around us, and trusting that God can work through even the most ordinary circumstances. His willingness to go to Samaria, a place where he was not welcome, reminds us that our faith should break down barriers, not build them up. Bartholomew, often identified with Nathanael, was a man of integrity and honesty. He was initially skeptical when Philip told him about Jesus, famously asking, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" But he was also a seeker of truth, open to the possibility that he might be wrong. When he met Jesus, his skepticism vanished. Jesus saw his honest heart, his lack of guile, and declared him an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit. Bartholomew immediately recognized Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God. After Pentecost, Bartholomew embarked on missionary journeys, taking the gospel to distant lands. He is said to have traveled to India, where he preached and established Christian communities. I once had a conversation with a friend who was an atheist. He was very skeptical of religion, and he had a lot of questions about Christianity. But he was also genuinely curious, and he was willing to listen to my perspective. We had many long discussions, and while he didn't become a Christian, he gained a new respect for my faith. Like Bartholomew, he was an honest seeker, willing to engage with ideas that challenged his own worldview. Bartholomew is also associated with Armenia, where he is revered as one of the founders of the Armenian Church. According to tradition, he and the apostle Thaddeus, Jude, brought Christianity to Armenia, where they faced strong opposition from the local rulers. Bartholomew's ministry in Armenia ultimately led to his martyrdom. He was arrested, tortured, and subjected to one of the most horrific forms of execution imaginable: flaying. This involved stripping the skin from the body while the victim was still alive. After being flayed, Bartholomew was then beheaded. His death was a testament to his unwavering faith and his commitment to spreading the gospel, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Bartholomew's story is a powerful reminder that the path of discipleship can be fraught with danger and suffering. It challenges us to consider what we are willing to endure for our faith. Are we willing to stand up for what we believe in, even when it costs us dearly? His brutal death is a stark contrast to his honest and open heart, reminding us that the world is not always kind to those who seek truth and righteousness. Matthew, also known as Levi, was a tax collector, a profession despised by the Jews because of their collaboration with the Roman occupiers and their reputation for dishonesty. Tax collectors were seen as outcasts, sinners, traitors to their own people. Yet Jesus saw something in Matthew that others didn't. He saw a man who was capable of change, a man who was yearning for something more. When Jesus called him, saying, "Follow me," Matthew didn't hesitate. He left his lucrative post, his comfortable life, and followed Jesus. This radical transformation is a testament to the power of grace and the boundless love of God. To celebrate his new life, Matthew hosted a feast for Jesus, inviting his fellow tax collectors and other sinners. This act of inclusion angered the Pharisees, who criticized Jesus for associating with such people. But Jesus responded, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." The Pharisees were a Jewish sect known for their strict adherence to the law of Moses and their emphasis on ritual purity. They often looked down on those who didn't meet their standards, including tax collectors and other social outcasts. Matthew's transformation from a despised tax collector to a devoted follower of Jesus is one of the most powerful stories in the Gospels. He is also credited with writing the Gospel of Matthew, a detailed account of Jesus' life, teachings, death, and resurrection, with a particular focus on how Jesus fulfilled the prophecies of the Old Testament. After Pentecost, Matthew dedicated his life to spreading the gospel. Tradition tells us he traveled to various regions, including Ethiopia, where he preached and established Christian communities. Like many of the other apostles, Matthew ultimately faced martyrdom for his faith. He is said to have been killed by the sword in Ethiopia, a testament to his unwavering commitment to Christ. Matthew's story is a powerful reminder that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. It doesn't matter what we've done in the past, what mistakes we've made, or how far we've strayed. God's love is always available to us, waiting to transform our lives. It also challenges us to examine our own prejudices and to see the potential for good in everyone, even those who seem most unlikely. Thomas, often called Doubting Thomas, is perhaps best known for his initial skepticism regarding Jesus' resurrection. When the other apostles told him they had seen the risen Lord, Thomas refused to believe unless he could see the nail marks in Jesus' hands and put his finger where the nails were, and put his hand into his side. This wasn't a rejection of faith, but a desire for certainty, a need for tangible proof. And Jesus, in his infinite mercy, granted Thomas his wish. He appeared to Thomas, invited him to touch his wounds, and said, "Stop doubting and believe." Confronted with the undeniable reality of the resurrection, Thomas made one of the most powerful declarations of faith in the New Testament, "My Lord and my God." I think we all have a little bit of Thomas in us. We all have moments of doubt, times when we question our beliefs, when we need more than just words to convince us. I remember a time when I was struggling with a particularly difficult theological concept. I wrestled with it for months, reading books, talking to people, but I just couldn't seem to grasp it. Then, one day, I had an experience that I can only describe as a moment of clarity. It was like a light bulb went on in my head, and suddenly everything made sense. Like Thomas, I needed that extra something, that personal encounter, to move from doubt to belief. Thomas's journey from doubt to faith is a testament to the power of personal encounter with Christ. After Pentecost, Thomas became a bold and courageous evangelist. Tradition tells us he traveled to India, where he preached the gospel and established Christian communities along the Malabar coast. Thomas's ministry in India had a lasting impact. The Thomas Christians, a vibrant Christian community that traces its origins back to the apostle, still exists in India today. But his work there also led to his martyrdom. According to tradition, Thomas was killed by being pierced with spears near Chennai, India. His death, like that of the other apostles, was a testament to his unwavering faith and his commitment to spreading the gospel to the ends of the earth. Thomas's story encourages us to embrace our doubts, to ask questions, and to seek a deeper understanding of our faith. It reminds us that faith is not always easy, that it's okay to struggle, and that God can handle our questions. It also highlights the importance of personal experience in our faith journey. It's in those moments where we encounter Christ for ourselves that our faith becomes truly our own. James the Less, often identified with James the son of Alphaeus, is one of the more obscure apostles. However, many scholars believe he is the same person as James the Just, the leader of the church in Jerusalem and a key figure in the early Christian community. This James was known for his deep piety, his unwavering commitment to prayer, and his strong sense of justice. He was so devoted to prayer that it was said his knees became hard like a camel's from kneeling for so long. He played a crucial role in the Council of Jerusalem, a pivotal event in the early church where it was decided that Gentile converts to Christianity did not need to follow all the Jewish laws, including circumcision. This decision paved the way for the expansion of Christianity beyond its Jewish roots. The Council of Jerusalem was a major turning point in the history of the early church. It addressed the growing tension between Jewish Christians who believed that Gentile converts should follow Jewish law and those who believed that faith in Christ was sufficient for salvation. James's leadership in the Jerusalem church was marked by wisdom, compassion, and a deep concern for the poor and marginalized. He was highly respected by both Christians and Jews for his integrity and his commitment to justice. Despite his respected position, James eventually faced martyrdom for his faith. According to the Jewish historian Josephus and early church tradition, James was condemned to death by the high priest Ananus during a period of political turmoil in Jerusalem. He was taken to the pinnacle of the temple and ordered to renounce his faith in Jesus. When he refused, he was thrown down to the ground below. Miraculously, he survived the fall, but his enemies then stoned him. Finally, a fuller, someone who cleans cloth, struck him on the head with a club, killing him. James's story is a powerful example of a life lived in service to God and others. His commitment to prayer, his dedication to justice, and his unwavering faith, even in the face of death, are an inspiration to us all. His death reminds us that true leadership is not about power or prestige, but about serving others with humility and compassion. Jude, also known as Thaddeus or Lebbaeus, was another of the less well-known apostles. However, his question to Jesus at the Last Supper reveals a deep desire to understand Jesus' plan. He asked, "Lord, why do you intend to show yourself to us and not to the world?" Jesus' response emphasized the importance of love and obedience as the keys to experiencing God's presence. After Pentecost, Jude became a zealous missionary, taking the gospel to distant lands. He is said to have traveled to Mesopotamia, Persia, and Armenia, preaching the message of Christ and establishing Christian communities. Mesopotamia and Persia were regions with diverse religious beliefs, including Zoroastrianism, a major religion at the time. Jude's missionary work in these areas would have been challenging and dangerous. Jude's unwavering commitment to spreading the gospel ultimately led to his martyrdom. According to tradition, he was killed in Persia, either by being clubbed to death or by being beheaded with an axe. Jude is often invoked as the patron saint of lost causes, a testament to his enduring legacy of hope and perseverance. People turned to him in times of desperation, seeking his intercession in seemingly impossible situations. Jude's story reminds us that even when we feel lost or hopeless, God is still with us. He can work through even the most difficult circumstances, and he can bring hope to even the most desperate situations. Jude's association with lost causes is a powerful symbol of God's unwavering love and his ability to bring good out of even the darkest of times. Simon, known as Simon the Zealot, was a member of a radical Jewish group that advocated armed resistance against Roman rule. The Zealots were passionate about their faith and their freedom, and they were willing to fight and die for their cause. Simon's inclusion among the apostles is significant. It demonstrates that Jesus' message of love and forgiveness could reach even the most hardened hearts, even those who were committed to violence and revolution. Imagine the transformation that must have taken place within Simon when he encountered Jesus. He went from being a man of war to a man of peace, from seeking to overthrow the Roman Empire by force to seeking to establish the kingdom of God through love. The Zealots were a significant force in first-century Judea. They played a major role in the Jewish revolt against Rome that began in 66 AD, which ultimately led to the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple in 70 AD. After Pentecost, Simon dedicated his life to spreading the gospel. Tradition tells us he traveled to various regions, including possibly Egypt, North Africa, and even Britain, preaching the message of Christ. Like many of the other apostles, Simon ultimately faced martyrdom for his faith. According to some traditions, he was crucified. Others say he was martyred in Persia alongside Jude, and that he was sawn in half. His death was a testament to his transformation from a violent revolutionary to a peaceful follower of Christ. Simon's story is a powerful reminder that God's love can transform even the most unlikely individuals. It challenges us to consider how we can be agents of peace in a world that is often filled with violence and conflict. It reminds us that true and lasting change comes not through force, but through love, forgiveness, and a commitment to building a better world. The stories of the 12 apostles are not just relics of the past. They are living testimonies to the power of faith, the cost of discipleship, and the transformative love of God. These ordinary men, with all their flaws and imperfections, were chosen by Jesus to carry his message to the world. They faced persecution, imprisonment, torture, and death. Yet they remained faithful to their calling. Their lives and deaths planted the seeds of a movement that would change the course of history, a movement that continues to this day. Their stories challenge us, inspire us, and call us to action. They remind us that we, too, are called to be disciples, to share the good news, and to make a difference in the world. The apostles' journeys were unique, Yet they all shared a common thread, a deep, abiding faith that transformed their lives and empowered them to change the world. They weren't perfect. They stumbled, they doubted, they faced their fears, but they kept going. They teach us that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting in something bigger than ourselves, even when we don't understand. It's about stepping out in obedience, even when the path ahead is uncertain. It's about loving others, even when it's difficult. As I reflect on the lives of these 12 men, I'm challenged to examine my own faith. Am I willing to step out of my comfort zone, to take risks for what I believe in? Am I willing to serve others, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable? Am I willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's unpopular? Their stories are not just inspiring, they are also deeply convicting. They call me to a higher standard, a deeper commitment, a more radical faith. The apostles have passed the torch to us. Their legacy lives on in every act of love, every act of service, every act of courage inspired by their example. We are now the ones called to carry the message of hope, forgiveness, and reconciliation to a world in desperate need of it. The question is, how will we respond? What will our story be? Will we be like Peter, overcoming our failures to become bold leaders? Will we be like Andrew, quietly connecting others to Christ? Will we be like James, willing to pay the ultimate price for our faith? Will we be like John, finding hope even in the darkest of times? Being a follower of Christ in today's world is not easy. We face our own challenges, our own forms of persecution. We may not be called to martyrdom in the same way the apostles were, but we are called to live out our faith authentically, to be a light in the darkness, to be a voice for the voiceless, to be agents of change in a broken world. This may look different for each of us. For some, it may mean serving in their local church or community. For others, it may mean advocating for social justice or working to alleviate poverty. For still others, it may mean simply living out their faith in their daily interactions with family, friends, and colleagues. No matter what form it takes, living out the legacy of the apostles means living a life of love, service, and sacrifice. Never underestimate the power of one. One person following Christ with their whole heart can make a profound difference in the world. The apostles were just ordinary individuals, but they allowed themselves to be used by God, and their impact was extraordinary. We too can be used by God to do great things if we are willing to say yes to His call. It starts with small acts of obedience, small acts of kindness, small acts of faith. These small acts, multiplied over time, can create a ripple effect, transforming lives, communities, and ultimately the world. The story of the apostles is not just a story of the past. It's an ongoing story, an unfinished story that we are all a part of. The church, the body of Christ, is still being built, still growing, still expanding into every corner of the world. And we are all called to play a role in that story. We are the hands and feet of Christ in the world today. We are the ones called to carry on the legacy of the apostles, to share the good news, to love our neighbors, and to make a difference in the world. So I invite you today to consider your own journey of faith. Where are you on that journey? What is God calling you to do? How can you live out the legacy of the apostles in your own life? It may seem daunting, but remember, you are not alone. God is with you, just as He was with the apostles. He will equip you, He will empower you, and He will guide you every step of the way. The apostles' stories are a powerful reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they are empowered by the Spirit of God. They faced incredible challenges, but their faith sustained them. Their legacy continues to inspire us today. Let us embrace their example. Let us live out our faith with courage and conviction. And let us be a part of the ongoing story of God's redemptive work in the world. The torch has been passed. Let's carry it brightly, together, into the future.